So we're going to go ahead and get started on today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. We are very excited to have Michelle Woods, who is the Student Career Services Director at the University of Michigan School of Social Work, here to talk to us today about how to advance your social work career, tips for social work job search and interviewing. And we wanted to specifically have this. It's Social Work Month, so it's a really good time to kind of empower ourselves to be better professionals. I'm guessing many of folks on today's webinar are students or soon-to-be graduates or maybe new professionals who are really looking to get their career off the ground. But if you are a seasoned professional, just kind of looking to update some tips too, this will be a great session for you. And Michelle is a wonderful resource at the University of Michigan. So before we get started with Michelle's presentation, I wanted to just give folks a couple of logistical pieces for today. So if you do have questions, and please feel free to ask questions, or if you have comments, type those into the chat box at any time during our hour today, and we'll get those answered for you. Or if you have resources you'd like to share, please feel free to put those in the chat box. There won't be any way to communicate verbally, so that's our way to communicate with one another for the next hour. We also do have a few handouts. They are in your drop-down section under handouts, so please feel free to download those before the session ends today. Those will be some supplemental resources for you. And to get to know folks a little bit better today, we do have just a quick poll question. So if you could, it's going to pop up on your screen here in a second. What area of social work practice are you in, or what licensure level do you currently have? Bachelor's level, clinical MSW, or macro MSW? And folks will just take a moment to complete that. Give folks a couple more seconds. All right, thank you. So our pretty spread out group today, we've got about 40% BSW, 40% clinical MSW, and 20% macro. And it looks like one of the comments too, also suggestions for retirees looking to get back into the workforce. So probably a big spectrum of folks for us to talk about today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. Let me just unmute her line really quick, and we will get started today. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Dwayne, for inviting me here to talk about job searching. It's one of my favorite topics, and I really appreciate everyone who's online who came in to really think about their own professional development and social work. And thank you for answering those questions. I wanted to get a sense of who have tuned in and what your interest would be. And so, as Dwayne alluded to, the March is Social Work Month, and it's a celebration of social workers across the country. And the slogan for this year is Elevate Social Work. And so that's really timely in terms of professional development and thinking about just elevating yourself in the profession as you think about transitioning out of school into the workforce, or as one person had alluded to in the poll, transitioning back into the workforce from retirement. So it's all about elevating yourself in the profession. And so I thank you for thinking about that in terms of your own career in the profession of social work. And thank you for getting into this profession. I'm glad to be and have been thankful to be a social worker for the last 30 plus years, and it's been a great ride for me. So thank you for all doing the work that you're going to do, or the work that you have done. So To set the tone for today's session, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the stats out there that I have been informed about regarding job searching. So as you can, if you look at the slide, about 70 to 80% of the jobs out there are never posted online or advertised publicly. So I thought that was astounding number when you think about it, because most of us are used to either ads, if you've been in the workforce for a long period of time, ads in journals, magazines, and so forth. And then as students, sometimes you think the best route would be a job posting. So you sit and you kind of wait, and you wait and wait for a posting to pop up, and it never does. Or if it does come up, then we'll talk about this in a little bit. A lot of people are at home now and can apply online, so employers are bombarded with a lot of applications for a single job. So the competition for a single job that is posted is fierce. And then you don't know that the majority of jobs available out there are not posted online. So how do you kind of sort through that quagmire of the job searching process? And the next bullet point talks about networking. So over a third of the new hires that come into organizations are referred. So the more networking that you do, the better option and that you have for landing an interview and also landing a particular job, because we'll talk about what the employer's perspective is when they are out there job hunting and searching for someone to fill a position. We've also, in the Career Services Office, get feedback from large organizations, agencies, businesses. They're utilizing more application tracking systems now, because if they do post their information online, then they will get a lot of applicants for one position. So how do they really sort out who to bring in for an interview? So what they're doing is contracting with software organizations that or vendors that create these application tracking systems. And what it does is it previews your resume and your cover letter for specific content and keywords. And if it doesn't fit the certain number of matches and keywords, then your application is not moved on to actually the hiring manager or the hiring committee, who will decide who they interview. Organizations are also using HR professionals to do this. And a lot of HR professionals are not social workers. So they may be in an organization where they're sorting through resumes for an executive director, to a clinical social worker, to a doctor, to a development organizer, a janitor. So they're sorting through all different positions within one organization. So they may know very little about the field of social work. So they're giving certain directives, usually by the hiring committee, to focus on keywords, and then to only give them a short stack of resumes and applicants to consider. So how do you kind of sort through that maze of resumes through an HR or a tracking system? I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And employers interview about 5 to 10 applicants for a job. It takes a lot of time and energy to hire a new person into a position. And just because you are on the hiring committee or you're a manager seeking to hire someone for a new position doesn't mean that the work that you need to get done for an organization stops during that time. So they are interested in maximizing the amount of time that they do have. So they want to interview the top candidates and not to interview a whole lot of people. So they try to weed down the applicants to maybe 5 to 10. And a lot of organizations may get about 100 applicants for a position. So that's a lot of weeding down of applicants to get to the 5 to 10 that you want to interview. So in light of that kind of scenario out there, we also have to take in consideration the employer's point of view. And it's very important for you to think about that as an applicant, because typically as an applicant, you're thinking about your own point of view. You want to get a job within an organization doing the work that you're interested in doing. An employer is interested in hiring, but they are also concerned about, I think, 3 main points here. And so they are highly focused on trying to bring in individuals who are the best fit for their organization and the best fit for the position that they are hiring for. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money to hire someone into an organization, to get them trained. Sometimes individuals report back that it takes about a year, year and a half to fully get someone into their organization and trained and ready to go. And so that's a lot of time and money. And so you, as an employer, want to pick the best person, because you don't want to have to start the application process again because an applicant didn't fit in. And it's also not a good scenario for someone coming into an organization for a position that's not a best fit for them or a good fit, because then you're not happy as well, and it might affect, your career as well, if you go into a position where it's not working out for you and you have to leave right away or something like that. So they're really concerned about the best fit for the position in their organization. And when we talk about interviewing down the road, we will also take in consideration this point, because a lot of the interview questions will get at fit for the position and fit for the culture of the organization. Employers are concerned about risk. They want low risk when it comes to hiring someone into an organization, because of what I alluded to regarding fit. You're hiring someone, probably will come in as part of a team that you already have there. So you want someone who's able to come in, perform the job, and also relatively kind of fit in with the culture of the organization. So you are wanting to take a low risk on someone versus a high risk. So a lot of the ways that employers will hire someone is to reduce the risk that they take with someone. So we're going to talk about that too later on. The employer's point of view also in terms of money is that they don't want to spend a lot of time and money trying to hire people over and over again. Turnover costs organizations a lot. So they're interested in saving, and that is a large implication for how they hire individuals as well. So when we talk, So when we talk about the content and the stats out there for job searching, and then we look at the employer's perspective, what should you do as a person who is wanting to find a job for yourself? So in light of all of that scenario, these are some of the tips that I'm going to talk about in more detail of what you should really concentrate on. Your job search now should be more competitive, and it should be more strategic. Because of those stats and what the employer's concerns are, the more that you are out there being more focused, knowing what you want to do, what organization that you want to work at, and then how best you fit in with the position and the organization, the better you are at connecting with employers, and the better you are at convincing employers that you're a good fit for their organization and can do the best job possible. So what should you concentrate on to kind of get you to that point? The most important thing that I want you to take some time to do is to complete a self-assessment. You should take some time to think about, what do you want to do? What type of career do you want to have? Do you want to work with children in child welfare as a foster care caseworker? Are you interested in independent living services? Are you interested in working to make an impact in gerontology, and you want to work for an organization where that's a part of their mission, and you're interested in developing programs for seniors to carry out that mission for independent living or services for the elderly? Are you interested in macro social work and you want to develop programs? Are you interested in fundraising and development? So you want to raise money for organizations. Are you good at that? So when you think about what type of career you want to have, what is that overall goal? And then that self-assessment is to think about, what type of skills do you have that you've developed so far that will make you more marketable for that particular type of position. So that self-assessment is key in being strategic in what type of job that you are going to go for, what organization you're going to work for, and how you're going to present yourself to an employer. And once you know what you want to do and what skills you want to have, then you're going to look at researching possible job settings. So where is the work being done that you want to do? So we're going to talk a little bit more about how to search for that. Networking, as I talked about in the previous couple of slides, about a third of the new hires for an organization are made through referrals. So it is key to have, as part of your job search, making connections and networking. And I'll talk a little bit about informational interviewing and how that can be pivotal to learning about what's out there, and also having organizations or individuals learn a little bit about what you're interested in. It's also important to tailor your resume and your cover letter to each and every specific job. Now, in 2008, when there was a downturn in the market, employers got really strict about fit. And if they had any positions that opened up, there were a lot of applicants who were applying for those positions because the economy wasn't doing so great. And so employers really tightened up on who they would bring in for particular positions because they could do that. And that type of frame of reference has continued on, even though the environment now and the economy has grown and there are more jobs available. Employers still think about fit, and they still think about turnover and saving money. So they only want to interview those who they feel are a good fit for their organization. So you should not just blanketly send out resumes and cover letters to any position and have that cover letter and resume be the same for every position. You need to tailor it to get recognized and have the ability for someone to think that you're good enough to come in for an interview. And you want to spend some time, as you think about your job search and you're out there, spend some time developing your interviewing skills and how to market yourself. You have to be able to talk about your accomplishments, your goals, how you fit in with an organization, either their mission, the work that they're doing. Organizations, people who are hiring want to know, why are you interested in working for them? And why are you interested in a particular position? So you have to be effective at communicating that in an interview. So let's get into a little bit more detail about a self-assessment. So as you think about a self-assessment, you really should take some time to write down your ideal job. What is your goal? So what position do you want to have once you finish your program? Or what position do you want to achieve or transition to if you've been working in the field for a little bit? And what's your next step? So what do you want to do? You need to write that down. So write down what initial position, and then have an idea of where you want to go, maybe 2 to 5 years out. And the reason why it's important to think about this, for those who are going to graduate, if you're new to the profession, you may seek out positions that are great entry-level positions, but you also may have the 2-year goal of obtaining your clinical license. So you want to look for positions that will have the ability for you to gain those skills, and also work within an organization that might provide support for you to get that advanced level of licensure. So that might be important to you for what type of organization you strategically network with. Also, it will let the employer know if they're interviewing you and they ask you what your long-term goals are, then you have something to talk about in terms of maybe growing with an organization, or also what your own professional growth is as a social worker. It's very impressive for an employer to know that you've been thinking about where you want to go in terms of your own professional career, how that aligns with their organization. The number one thing is also to know why you should be hired. So when you're thinking about what you want to do, what type of career or position that you want to have or obtain, you want to list and think about what skills do you have that are related to that particular position that will make you a good fit. And you don't have to have every skill that that position needs to have, but you should know which skills you do have that are directly related to that position, or what personality strengths that you have that is related to the work that needs to be done at that in that position or the organization. And so you have to think also about your accomplishments when you're thinking about your skills and your strengths, because that's how you want to market yourself to an employer. And sometimes it's hard to think about what skills you do have. And so sometimes I'll sit with students, I'll sit with alum, and we will go over your past resume. We will go over your field not agreements, but your field evaluations if you're a current student, what classes that you took in the school. And then I'll look at different position descriptions. So we'll do a little hunting on that to get an idea of what the different position descriptions are listing as skills, and then circle the ones that the student or the alum does have. And then we'll start creating stories around those particular skills, because that bottom point there, you want to have some real life examples. You want to be able to discuss with an employer in an interview what skills you do have that will substantiate what you put on your resume, because they're going to ask you about it. So after you've done a self-assessment and you know what type of job you want to have and some skills that you have that are related to that job. Then you want to take some time to strategically search for organizations that are doing the work that you're interested in doing and hiring the type of positions that you're interested in going after. So for students, sometimes I have them think about similar field placement agencies. So if you're currently in school, a lot of times you have access to your agency slot list or listing where you went and you either reviewed different placement options, or maybe you met with someone in the field office and talked about different field options that might be really good for you. Circling back with the field office to get an idea of similar organizations in the area. I know at U of M we have an electronic database that students can still go into and look at different agencies in the Southeast area. So you may have a similar list that you might be able to circle back to find potential organizations to target. Also, other schools of social work may have a list of their agency partners on their website. Say you're looking at a position that might be in Baltimore, Maryland. The University of Maryland, Baltimore has on their fields, if you go to their website and look at the field placement section, they have a list of some of the agencies that they place their students at. So that might give you a starting point of different agencies to kind of investigate. Sometimes I'll sit with someone and we'll just Google an area of interest, for example, youth development in San Francisco. So we'll type that in, and then organizations that are tagged on websites will pop up, and that'll begin a list of organizations to look at their website and potentially target. The United Way pages. The United Way is a fiduciary of smaller organizations, and a lot of times they're listed by, the United Way is listed by county. So you can look at, say, Washtenaw County or Oakland County, and they'll have a list of their agency partners on their website. The Yellow Pages, that's online now. Different websites like Indeed.com, Idealist, WorkForGood.org are also ways that you can kind of filter out organizations. The Michigan Nonprofit Association has a list of different nonprofits in the state of Michigan. And then there are nonprofit associations in other states too. So just like the Michigan Nonprofit Association has a main hub or website, so does Indiana and Illinois have different nonprofit associations where you can look. So those are places where you can begin to kind of search organizations. Social workers tend to work in a variety of different areas. So don't forget about, say, city, local, county, state, and federal government, colleges and universities. We've had some of our graduates who are interested in clinical research and still developing their clinical skills work for the University of Michigan Medical School at an institute where they have a large research project, and they're working with patients and clients. So that particular graduate is gaining not only research skills, but they're getting their clinical license because they're meeting with clients as part of the research study. And their long-term goal is to go on to a PhD program. But that is an area that you wouldn't think to look, but certainly there are opportunities if you have a certain goal in mind within a college or university to work as a social worker. We have, I think, over at U of M, about 500 social workers working on U of M campus alone in many different aspects. So there are other areas that are hiring social worker that you may not think of, that may help you with your own, goals and career choices. Advocacy agencies and think tanks, certainly, and then businesses. If you're thinking about non-traditional areas of social work, consulting, working for Google, we've had some of our graduates go on there thinking about economics and impact of organizations within different neighborhoods. So we had a graduate who was interested in that. So they're working at a savings and loan as a consultant for the community to come in and create savings accounts. And also other type of financial services for people within an organization. And so she had a different type of career goal and looked at organizations where she would be a good fit. So that's kind of a running list of different organizations. Let's talk a little bit about networking, because once you are strategic and thinking about the work that you want to do, and then strategic in looking at organizations that are doing that type of work, it's time to get out there and get yourself known for what your career goals are, and also what type of talents that you have as a social worker. So you want to think about networking, and these are different ideas that I have that I can throw out there for you to network. If you are at a school where they have a career center that you can go to, sometimes they can connect you with alum or professionals who are doing the work that you're interested in doing. So sometimes we do that here, connecting students. They have an idea of what they want to do. Then I try to find alumni who may be in the same field, so someone could do an informational interview with that alum. Or if a student is interested in a particular organization and they want to know what it's like to work there, then connecting that student with that an alum at that organization would be key. Using social media, certainly. LinkedIn is your professional resume online. So some people can use LinkedIn effectively in connecting with organizations that have like-minded interests, as well as having your connecting with other alumni from your schools of social work, people within organizations that you're interested in working for, because some large organizations have their own LinkedIn groups and accounts that you can join. Areas of interest. So certainly on LinkedIn, there are people who are doing the work that you're interested in doing, sometimes have groups that you can join as well. Twitter is good at following individuals or organizations that you have an interest in as well. Certainly your school's alumni association is good for networking. Sometimes there are alumni groups in different areas of the state of Michigan. Also, alumni associations in different parts of the country that you may be able to connect with as well. We're going to talk a little bit about informational interviewing, and I want you to get really adept at informational interviewing, because that's a great way to learn about the profession, as well as learn about organizations. Don't forget about your own personal and professional contacts that you already have. Should keep people up to date on what your goals are, when you're ready to find employment, what you're looking for. So people, especially social workers, are willing to help you along your journey, and they can provide great contacts for you. So you want to continue to make connections that way. Don't forget about professional organizations like NASW. They have conferences, workshops, We've had alum who were transitioning from one field to another, so they were getting continuing ed, training, or going to workshops, and they were able to connect with people that way. And then we have a couple of people who got their job just by going to a workshop and making connections with people who are also there, getting training and going to an organization that they were interested in. So you don't want to forget about that. I put down job club or peer support. The other way that through just career services and feedback that we get from alumni about increasing their opportunities out there, increasing their likelihood to get a job, is to have some accountability. So some people have joined job clubs, so they form a job club with friends, peers, colleagues who are also looking for jobs, just to keep themselves accountable, to check in, to have a second eye on their materials, to provide social support as well as you go through the job hunting process. It can get lonely out there if you're just sitting at home doing this by yourself. And so a job club is a really great way to kind of help you through that journey and have some support as you do that. So networking, when we talk about employers and the low risk they want to take in hiring someone new, if you can get temporary employment within an organization and have a track record that they can go by, then you can pop into a position that you actually wanted or have been targeting. So we have some individuals have done that with U of M, because sometimes it's harder to get into the position that you really want at U of M, maybe at the hospital as a medical social worker. So we have some of our graduates who will sign on as a contingent or temporary employee in the U of M hospital, the emergency room, and then get recognition by just networking in the work that they're doing as a temp or contingent employee. So that's a great way to get into a larger organization. Also volunteering. So if an employer gets to know you because you've been volunteering in another capacity, when the position comes up, then a lot of times then that puts you ahead of the game for that particular position, because you've already been known within that organization. So that's a great way just to get yourself out there. Let's talk about informational interviewing, because that is great for learning about different positions out there that you may have as your ideal job, if you're still in school, or if you're thinking about moving into a new position, then it's a great way to find out what's going on in the industry that you want to move into, or the type of field of social work you want to move into. So an informational interview is you as a job seeker in a short meeting with someone who is either employed at that organization in the job that you are potentially trying to obtain, or they hire for the different positions that you're interested in obtaining. So they're either a hiring manager, or they are doing the type of work that you're interested in doing. And the goal is for an informational interview is fact finding. It's for you to sit with someone to discuss and ask about the culture of the organization. How do they hire new employees? What type of positions do they hire for that related to your job or your area of interest? If you're meeting with a manager, what's the typical salary range for these type of positions? Also, what do they look for in terms of the resumes and cover letters and skills? So what's important for them? So you can find a lot of that information out by just having these informal discussions. They're usually about 30 minutes, and they can be over the phone or in person. And a lot of times through informational interviewing, you're increasing your network. and your contacts. And also, a lot of times, informational interview will lead to you getting information about potential job prospects in the future, because now you've gotten to know someone within an organization of interest to you. And this is just some more detailed information on who to interview, just like I was saying, maybe interviewing those who are doing the type of work that you're interested in, or who are hiring for the position that you're interested in being hired for. And then there's a little checklist there. You definitely have to identify the organization and find a potential contact. And a lot of times you are reviewing or looking at an agency's website for this for more detailed information. You may have to make a cold call to, they'll have a list of their staff or contact information. So you may have to cold call and set that up. And most people within these organizations are willing to talk to you as potential people who are going into the same field that they're into. So especially in social work, we're very happy to talk to those who are interested in the work that we do. And so a lot of times you will get a yes. Very few people will say no for an informational interview, as long as you're very specific about that's what your intentions are. And then you come to that meeting with your questions, and then always follow up with a thank you note to that individual after they've spent some time with you. One thing I want you to know is that you do not want to set up an informational interview if you have already applied for a job within that organization, because one, you might run into people who are on the hiring committee and they may not want to do an informational interview with you because you have applied for a job and they don't want to be in a sticky situation. Also, they may think that you're trying to set up an interview. So if you've already applied for a position, open position within the organization, you do not do an informational interview within that same department. So let's talk a little bit about interviewing for maybe the last little bit of our time together today. So I have some tips on with that process. So what's the purpose of a job interview? Really to match the company to the employee. So, right, we're looking for best fit for the company and the hiring manager. They also want to meet you. How do you present yourself? So purpose of an interview, and they may have several different interviews that they may do for a position, and we're seeing that more and more where agencies, organizations have 2 to 3 rounds of interviews, especially the higher level positions that you go within an organization. You're going to have multiple interviews. Clarify your skills. A part of an interview is to sit down with you to look at to get a deeper dive into what skills that you have. Are you able to perform the job, or at least have the capacity to do well there? How do you handle yourself in stressful situations? So part of the interview is just looking at how you react. And especially in social work and the work that we are doing, you may end up being the face of the organization, representing the organization in the community, and there may be many different stressful situations that you find yourself in. So how do you present yourself in that scenario? An interview is also time for you to look at your match with the employer. So are you really a good fit for this particular job or organization? So you want to think about that as you prepare for an interview and have a list of questions that you want to ask them at the time of the interview. So when you're going in for an interview, these different perspectives should be in the back of your mind, that's what the purpose is of this particular interview. And so a lot of your questions are going to be crafted your answers are going to be crafted based on these point of view. So that's what the purpose of the interview is, right? So the other thing to keep in mind is an interview is to weed out potentially problematic candidates. So some of the questions will get at what are your weaknesses. They may ask you, how do you handle a crisis situation? They may look at your work history and ask you questions about that. So they're concerned about not having to rehire someone because it's not going to work out well within their organization, and there were potential red flags that they didn't get to during an interview. So some of the questions may get at that. For an interview, your preparation is key. So you never want to go to an interview without having as much information about what to expect. You want to know the what, when, where, how of an interview. So when someone calls you to set up an interview, they should explain, is this interview by phone? Is it in person? Where is it? Are you meeting with a panel of people? Who are on the panel if they know or can give you an idea? Do you have to bring any additional information with you to the interview, like a writing sample? Do you have to make a presentation? So you want to get as much information about the interview as possible so you know how to prepare, and also you're not caught off guard when you actually show up to the interview and you're expecting one thing and it was totally different. When thinking about preparing, when you have applied for positions, you want to keep cut and paste because on the website, or if you have a copy of a job description, you want to put that in the folder and have that job description saved, as well as the resume and cover letter that you sent for that particular position, so that when you get called for an interview, you know to go back to that folder to review that job description and review what you sent, what materials that you sent for that particular job, because you're going to apply for multiple positions over time and you want to keep everything in order, and sometimes you get called several weeks after you've applied for a position and that job description may have gone away or it's not advertised as well out there anymore, and you don't want to try to have to remember what you applied for and where. Go back to the agency's website and review what they have on their website. There a little bit about their mission, a little bit about the program area or department that you're interviewing for. Sometimes they have a list of their staff members on their organization website. So if you know who you're meeting with, you can look at their bios in the advance of the interview. LinkedIn is also good for that too. If you can search a person's LinkedIn or Facebook, if they have put their name in, and you may be able to find a little bit of information about the people that you are interviewing with. So the actual interview, just some tips for that. You certainly want to be on time. Your interview starts from the point that you have any contact with that organization. So when they contact you for an interview by email or they call you on the phone, that is actually the beginning of your interview. So any interaction you have with any staff member within that organization, online, offline, phone, is your interview. So you want to have that in the back of your head, because as I noted, they're trying to weed out problematic candidates. So if you present yourself in an appropriate way to the assistant, the administrative assistant, that may get back to the hiring committee. Also the opposite, if you are competent, highly competent professional, that with interaction with any of their staff members, that also gets back to the hiring committee. I don't have to get into more detail about dress, but you certainly, no matter if the organization is a small grassroots organization and everyone wears jeans, you want to dress in a more professional and groomed manner. And then when you get hired, you will wear the quote unquote uniform or dress code within that organization. But you should come to the interview dressed appropriately and groomed. You want to be very positive and focus on your accomplishments during the interview. You've done that self-assessment a long time ago, and you've been very strategic about the position that you're interested in that organization. So now you can talk about why you fit in, why you're interested in that particular job, what skills do you have, what capacity you have to learn and grow within that organization. Bring your copies of your resume, any references, a laptop if you are presenting any information, like an e-portfolio, if they ask for a case study or anything like that, of course, information didactic, but you want to have your materials with you. Turn your cell phone off because, of course, it goes off at the least appropriate time possible. Someone calls you on the phone. So you want to make sure you turn off your cell phone. And then you always end with the interview with thanking the panelists and sending an email thank you to each person that you interview with. In that email, the thank you note can be an email or written, depending on kind of the organization and how they're proceeding. Some organizations hire on a slow basis, so you can write something and send it in snail mail. Other organizations are very quick in their turnaround, so an email is perfectly fine nowadays with a thank you note. So different interviews to kind of expect out there. There are phone interviews. So if someone calls you to set up a phone interview, then it's going to be quick. It's probably the initial screening, and it's going to be very skill focused. So it's usually the first reduction in or elimination of potential candidates. So you want to make sure that you have quiet space, a good connection, you can have information in front of you to talk. It's going to be short, very skill focused at that point. Let's talk about Skype and video. So the most important thing to really think about here is how you look when you are in a video or Skype format. So meaning when I say how you look, you want to do a test run to make sure your face is an appropriate level in the screen, so it's not cutting off the top of your head or something like that. Also, when you have a Skype or video, they can see your background, so you want to make sure that you're in a quiet space, that the background is pretty neutral, or that is either a view that you wouldn't be embarrassed about in terms of where you are in a location. And you want to test out your equipment beforehand, because nothing is more frustrating than trying to conduct a video interview, and at the time you don't have the right program downloaded to your computer, for instance. So that's the most important thing for Skype. Usually a Skype interview, it can be very brief if it's the first level interview. Say you're interviewing for an organization out of state, Skype might be their initial interaction with you, and then they may want you to come in for another interview. Sometimes Skype interviews are used also for fellowship type of post-MSW or postdoctoral fellowships, and then they want to follow up maybe in person later on. And so you want to make sure that you also have a groomed and professional appearance. You can have the information about the position and all of that in front of you. and be able to kind of work from that point of view while your reference materials while you're talking to the panel or the group. These are different types of interview questions that are out there. So you also want to be familiar with the type of questions that you may be asked. So there, if you are getting asked during an interview, you may have a wide variety of different types of questions thrown at you, anywhere from open-ended questions. I give an example, say, tell me about yourself. That's an open-ended question where you're going to talk a little bit about yourself, how it relates to that particular job. It's an open-ended question. A skill-based question gets at your knowledge about a particular area or your performance. So how do you manage a project as an example? What different clinical techniques that you use with a client who is experiencing X type of diagnosis. So you have to be able to talk about your skills and your techniques. So they're very specific. Sometimes they use questions to break the ice. If there's a panel, then they may ask you about the weather. They may ask how you're doing today. You're still interviewing, but they're just trying to get to know you a little bit. So your demeanor. Behavioral questions. Behavioral questions are more in-depth in nature. So they want you to tell a story, actually. So your answers are not going to be so brief. So the behavioral questions may say, tell me about the time that you handled a crisis. So they want you to describe a short story about how you handled a crisis. And they may kind of dive deeper. So if you handled the crisis, they may ask you, well, how did things kind of work out? Why did you use the technique that you use? Or why did you make the decision? So you have to be able to follow up on the story. And then, of course, expect the unexpected. I've had conversations with individuals who come back from their interviews, and there are always some type of unexpected question that's thrown in. For instance, what's your favorite book? If you were an ingredient in the salad, what will you be and why? All different types of kind of questions that kind of get thrown out there. And you just want to be authentic with your answering, and then know that sometimes you might have to think a little bit about the answer before you state it, because it might be an unexpected question. So you always want to have questions that you ask the employer. So that shows your enthusiasm. It shows that you come prepared for the interview and you're thinking about your role within the organization already. And these are a list of some questions that you may ask. They should not be questions that you can easily get off of their website. For instance, what's the mission of your organization? That you should at least be familiar with before you go in for an interview. That's not something that you would ask. So these are some questions that have been successful in demonstrating your enthusiasm, and there may be other questions depending on the nature of the position that you might have a question about as well that you might want to add. So you always want to have questions. And lastly, these are some resources for you to kind of follow up after. If you have any individual questions and you've tuned in and you want to email me, my email address was on the handout. You can certainly reach out to me with any questions that you may have about the self-assessment, your overall job search, searching for organizations, interviewing, any of that. You don't have to be a student at U of M or an alum at U of M. I really enjoy being a social worker, and really am excited about your professional journey and want to be as supportive as possible to you as you think about that. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. These are some resources out there that are very helpful. If you want to dive really deep into informational interviewing and you are a spreadsheet person and you like to be very organized or have a kind of a strategic plan on informational interviewing and networking, the 2-Hour Job Search is a great book for that. The Social Work Career Development book is a general handbook on just social work, jobs, and career planning. Carol Doling is just retired from Wash U in St. Louis, but she is great in terms of just thinking about the breadth of this social work, has a lot of examples in there for you to use. Of course, What Color is Your Parachute? As you think about, say, your life goals and tips for being very strategic in your job search, that's a great book, resource as well. And then I like Designing Your Life too. That particular book gets at your career journey in your life from a designer's perspective. So it's a little bit more creative approach to thinking about kind of what your life goals are. But if you're kind of stuck there and you want a fun kind of journey, then that's a great book. Every student at Stanford University has to go through Designing Your Life course as part of their undergraduate program. And I just thought it was great in terms of just thinking about your career and your life journey, and examining what your goals are. So those are my suggestions. And certainly, if you have any questions after here, don't hesitate to contact me. And I really appreciate you taking the time and staying on, went over a couple of minutes, staying on until the end as well. So thank you for tuning in. And I don't know if people want to stay, if there are any questions out there, Dwayne.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. That was a really great overview of everything from how to network, and how I've kind of been framing it is put the social in social work. A lot of what we do in our field is who we know and who we're connected with, and that absolutely ties a lot into our career searches here. But then searching for jobs, interviewing. But I think one of the key pieces you also talked about was how, as the potential employee, you're also interviewing the agency, and how important it is for the fit to be right for you too, not just vice versa. And I think that all can sometimes tie into burnout and self-care if you accept a position that isn't what you want for long-term career strategy too. I did want to kind of reinforce your point about being prepared for interviews, but also in some ways being flexible. And I'll give an example of here. We just had a hiring process for a position at NASW, and the candidates went through, the final candidates ended up going through 4 rounds of interviews. And that's not necessarily common, but in some positions that might be what you're looking at. And so in some of the interviews, it was a phone interview, and then some of them were panels, and some of them were just with 1 or 2 people. And so being prepared for all of those different styles, almost even if it's within one organization or one position you're applying for, you may run the whole gamut of experiences that you have to go through.
Right. That's
doing
true.
your research about the type of agency that you're applying for. I'm wondering if you have any, one question that came through is, do you have any examples of how social media has worked in somebody's favor in terms of either getting a job or getting an interview?
Excuse me. Yes, I do have a couple of examples. So one, we had a student who, or actually they're a graduate of our program now, but he was highly interested in program evaluation and program planning and stats and data visualization, all of that, report writing. And so he developed a very detailed LinkedIn profile, and a recruiter contacted him through his LinkedIn. So that recruiter, I guess, put in some keywords, and his LinkedIn profile popped up. And that recruiter was recruiting for an evaluation and research position for the VA hospital here in Ann Arbor. So some large study. And it was a permanent position that they were creating. And the recruiter reached out to him, and he interviewed and got that position. So, and that was just totally through his LinkedIn account. And then we had another graduate who created ePortfolio. They were dual degree in public health and social work. So they created an ePortfolio, and they were interested in healthcare policy and consulting. And so they had an ePortfolio, and was doing some networking at different conferences, and it had a link to her ePortfolio on her business card. And through this networking, someone just was an organization was interested in her. The person was at the conference. They looked at her ePortfolio and then flew her in for an interview through just different conversations.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll say personally, I have met people from across the country at conferences that only knew me because of Twitter. And so it's really weird to like make connections from people that really you don't have any physical contact with, but you may have a political connection or a social work connection, and then being able to maybe advance your career in some capacity that way. And I know social media is oftentimes free, so it's a good way to make those free connections, but also to learn what agencies are doing maybe that tie in with your personal interests. So whether they're doing maybe charity events or fundraisers, that maybe you can then bring in those sort of conversations into an interview process.
Right, definitely.
But I know we are out of time for today, so I want to thank everyone again for sticking around, those who are still on.
Yes, thank you.
Questions for Michelle, please feel free to email myself or Michelle. The information is in the handout. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up today. We hope to have you all on a future webinar. And thanks again, Michelle.
Oh, thank you, Dwayne. It's my pleasure. Anytime.
Happy Social Work Month, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.